Okie doke. So today we are going to be talking about factoring. Now, before I even start, I want to ask the big question of what is a factor? Because this is going to come up a lot in your mathematical career, and so you really want to make sure you know exactly what you're talking about. Now, the actual definition of a factor is any number or quantity that when multiplied with another produces a given number or expression. Now, that to me sounds incredibly complicated, so I don't like that. So I'm going to go ahead and give you my definition. So my definition is basically any number, any number that can be used to multiply into another number. So let's go ahead and talk about, let's say 2. So we have a number here, 2. Now, right off the bat, I want to ask myself, what are the factors of 2? And that would be 2 and 1. Because 2 times 1 does indeed give us 2. And so some numbers will actually have far more factors than others. So for example, 12 will have the factors of 1, 3, and 4. It's equal to 1 times 3 times 4. Now this is generally how we're going to write it, right? We write each of the factors as being multiplied because going back to here, at the end of the day, they are any number that can be used to multiply into another number, not add, not divide, not subtract, none of that. We're using multiplication. So 1 times 3 times 4. Now you might notice something here. 1 will always be a factor of any number that we have, even 0, right? Because 0 times 1 is still 0. So whenever we factor something, we cannot forget that 1 will always be a factor. Which brings me to my next point, which is prime factors. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this board. Now, prime factors are any numbers whose factors are 1 and that number. So let's go ahead and think of any examples. And right off the bat, I think of 13, right? And 13, even though it might be an unlucky number, there isn't any number besides 13 and 1 that will give us 13 when we multiply them, right? I can't think of 2 times anything that will give me 13 or 3 times anything or anything like that. This is prime number. So when you're starting to learn about factors, it might actually be helpful to write a list of well-known prime numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 5, etc. Right? They go on forever. And the reason why these are prime again is because the only factors of all of these numbers are 1 times that number. So whenever we factor something, we want to get it into prime numbers. So let's go ahead and practice that. Hold on. So what does it even mean to factor something? Well, the dictionary definition of factoring something, pretty complicated, is the act or process of separating an equation, formula, cryptogram, etc. into its component parts. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't like that kind of definition. It really doesn't mean anything to me. So my definition would be to pull apart a mathematical expression where all of the factors are prime and multiplied next to each other. All right, so let's go ahead and practice. Now, before I even start, if you are just starting to factor, it is incredibly helpful to have a list of prime numbers that are pretty commonly used in front of you so you can know when to stop. So let's go ahead and try it out with a number like 100. Now, whenever I start to factor, I'm starting to think of, rather than what are its factors, my first question are going to be, is going to be what numbers multiply into 100? And right off the bat, I think of 10 times 10. So I'm going to write it with these little like lines branching out from it next to it, so I can really just keep track of what I still have left to pull apart. Now let's go ahead and continue. My next question would be, after I pull it apart for the first time, is can these then be pulled apart? And by pulled apart, I mean, can they be factored or simplified? And by factored or simplified, I'm again asking the question, what can be multiplied to give me 10? And right off the bat, I think of 5 times 2 for each of them. And I need to pull each of them apart because I have multiple factors here, right? I can't just do one. So I know that they're multiplied next to each other, so I can check that off. But are they prime? And the answer is yes, they are prime. So we're not quite done yet, right? We've pulled apart the factors, they're multiplied next to each other, but I want to make sure that I am putting it in the right format. So I'm going to do from, there's two ways you can do it, but generally you either want to do it from increasing to decreasing order, but I like writing from highest to lowest. So what that would look like would be 5 times 5 times 2 times 2, right? I'm just rewriting these numbers that I have over here. And it is true that these are all factors of 100. So 100 factored would be this. So right over here, I have my answer. And that, my friends, is how you factor.